This
Okay.
conference will now be recorded.
Problem
This
with this, they
conference
want
will
to
now be recorded.
recording every session. Okay. Uh, so I don't know. Okay. So now, is it the screen is visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So now we will start with the acute suppurative otitis media. So what do you mean by acute suppurative otitis media? So acute otitis media, so it implies the acute pyogenic inflammation of the mucosa of middle ear cleft. So middle ear cleft includes, already we have discussed, eustachian tube, middle ear, attic, adductus, antrum, mastoid antrum, and mastoid air cells. So it's a big thing. So occur in all ages, but mainly in children. So very, very common in children. Why? Because the eustachian tube is shorter, wider, and more horizontally placed, and opens at a lower level in children. So these are the few predisposing factors. So from here you can make out that one of the route of infection is the most common, rather the most common route of infection is the eustachian tube. Okay, so there are other modalities like maybe a trauma, or and hematogenous, but the most common route of infection is via the eustachian tube. So the eustachian, I've told you, the infection of middle ear usually reaches through the eustachian tube. So, and reflux from nasopharynx into the middle ear occurs during swallowing or while blowing of nose, closed nose swallowing like a Toynbee maneuver, and also a result of negative middle ear pressure while sniffing. So all these activities, what they do is they create a negative pressure, and in some cases positive pressure, like let us say blowing of the nose. So we ask the, well, that is commonly we ask the person to perform in case of a retracted tympanic membrane, or also to test the patency of the eustachian tube. You ask the person to blow the nose, meanwhile you look into the tympanic membrane. But if the person is suffering from an upper respiratory tract infection and you ask the person to blow the nose, so what it does is it forcibly opens the eustachian tube by creating a positive pressure in the nasopharynx and pushes the air as well as the infected material into the eustachian tube and from there into the middle ear. So this is a very common route. Another is reflux from nasopharynx into middle ear, one that particularly during swallowing. So and particularly this is seen in case of a breastfed or bottle-fed infant who usually are fed in supine position. So once what happens is the milk gains entry into the eustachian tube and then goes into the middle ear. So other conditions like cause of anatomical obstruction like a big adenoids or nasopharyngeal tumors. So in nasopharyngeal tumors, the most one of the catch point is if a person presents to you with an adult person presents to you with unilateral conductive hearing loss and has a node in the neck, or presents to you with unilateral non-suppurative otitis media, then you suspect a nasopharyngeal mass. But in case of children, if there are adenoids and these adenoids are directly impinging onto the eustachian tube, like let us say grade 4 adenoid enlargement, that is almost covering 100% of the what you say, the posterior nares, definitely will lead to eustachian tube dysfunction. Infection like adenoiditis, tonsillitis, rhinitis, sinusitis, pharyngitis. So all these infection, what they do is this infection leads to because the infection lies because these are the mucosa is continuous. So there is no break in the mucosa. Like the mucosa of the nose is continuous with nasopharynx. So if you have rhinitis and sinusitis, then directly the spread will occur via the mucosa. And then what happens is the eustachian tube opening, which is located on the lateral wall of nasopharynx on either side, because of this mucosal infection and inflammation, there occurs edema. So this edema and also submucosal lymphatic involvement leads to closure of the um, eustachian tube. So as I told you before, normally the eustachian tube are closed. So whenever you talk or swallow, it opens, and when it opens, immediately the air enters into the middle ear. But here what happens, because of this chronic inflammation, the eustachian tube is unable to open. So that it predisposes to development of ASM. Forceful blowing of nose can push the infection into middle ear to the eustachian tube. We have already discussed. Swimming, especially during diving. So when you are diving, no, suppose you are diving or you are doing a deep sea diving or you are diving into the pool. So as you are going down, the pressure decreases. The pressure decreases, and then it leads to locking of the eustachian tube. So if you are going down very fast, no, the change in pressure, the body cannot adjust. So this leads to locking of the eustachian tube and causing ASM. Or particularly if the person has already a small perforation and diving, say, not into a swimming pool but into a lake or river where the water is not very, what you say, sterile. So in those cases, the infected water enter into the ear, and from ear through the perforation, it reaches the middle ear, and then the person develops an acute attack. But this you can say it as acute on chronic otitis media, because already the person was having CSI. Then post-nasal packing and after adenoidectomy. So post-nasal packing, when you are doing, this is usually done for a case of post-nasal bleed, which normally what you do is we go for an anterior nasal packing, and if after anterior nasal packing there is still a ooze, then post-nasal packing is done. So post-nasal packing, what happens? The gauze comes and tightly fits into the posterior nares. So thereby it directly obstructs the opening of the eustachian tube, leading to dysfunction. And after adenoidectomy, so what happens when you are doing an adenoidectomy? If you are careless in doing, then you might injure the torus tubaris. So once you injure the torus tubaris, there is very likely that immediately there won't be any problem, but as the child grows, so the injured eustachian tube will lose its normal functioning of opening and closing, thereby predisposing the child to development of it. Yes, well, this I have already told you. In supine position, bottle feeding, the milk will enter the middle ear via the eustachian tube. So this is here the picture. You can see this is the eustachian tube, and this is the middle ear over here. This is the tympanic membrane. Okay, and this is the epitympanum. And here you have the mastoid bone. So this is another picture that this this is the adductus ad antrum, and this is the mastoid antrum here, and these are different mastoid air cells. So all these will get inflamed because why? Because the lining epithelium is continuous. So once one part of epithelium is involved now, so the disease doesn't limit there; it spreads to involve the other part also. So predisposing factors like reduced immunity is one of the malnourishment, poor dietary habit, too much physical and mental exertion, and exposure to extreme of climate and temperature. Barotrauma during flying and deep water diving, exanthematous fever like mumps, measles, rubella, they all. But now because we are following the universal vaccination program, this incidence of mumps, measles, and rubella have come down. Palatal disorder like cleft palate and cleft lip, cleft palate particularly leads to malfunctioning of the eustachian tube. Can anyone tell me how palatal disorder is related to malfunctioning of eustachian tube? Anyone? Anwar? Anwar?
Sir, good morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How palatal disorder is related to malfunctioning of eustachian tube? Any idea?
During swallowing, any particles may obstruct the eustachian tube and it blocks the tube and it causes negative pressure, sir.
Okay. Lasya? Lasya is there?
Sir, good morning.
Morning. Lasya, do you agree with Anwar or you have some different opinion?
I agree, sir.
Agree. Nandini? Nandini is there, no? The undergraduate, any one of you, do you agree? Hello? Undergraduates, anyone? Okay. Sai has joined. Sai? Sai has not joined. Acha. So let me tell you, Anwar and Lasya. So if you see, what are the main two muscles which help in opening and closing of the eustachian tube? That is most important muscle is tensor valli palatini and to lesser extent levator palatini. So if you see the insertion of tensor valli palatini, it gets inserted into the soft palate, into the what you say, the palatal aponeurosis. So now if there is a cleft palate, so there will be no palatal aponeurosis. So the muscle also is not properly inserted. So how it will function? Anwar? Anwar,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
now you got the point?
Yes, sir.
Because the palate is not developed properly, so and the muscle tensor valli palatini gets attached to the uh, palatal aponeurosis, and that
Yes, sir.
thereby the functioning of this tensor valli palatini is hampered, leading to say the eustachian tube will remain open most of the time, and that will predispose to reflux into the what you say the middle ear. Then nasal allergy. Obviously, if allergy is there, then definitely most of the time the patient will have some amount of rhinitis, and this rhinitis definitely will lead to congestion and inflammation of the nasopharynx also. And another thing is which is not mentioned here is a Bacillus eustachian tube. So Bacillus eustachian tube but that is primarily seen in elderly person or those who have lost uh, uh, quite substantial amount of weight in a short period of time. So in those cases also you may find the eustachian tube will remain patulous because all of a sudden the fat and the thickness of the mucosa also will decrease. And then even in case of atrophic pharyngitis also where the mucosal thickness reduces and thereby predisposes to uh, so infection, generally viral nasal infection precedes early bacterial. This is very common thing. Always it is the virus which starts off or triggers the cascading reaction. Most commonly rhinovirus, respiratory syncytial virus, adenovirus, to name a few, and then followed by the superadded bacterial infection. So most common is pneumococcus. So Streptococcus pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenzae, Branhamella catarrhalis, or now known as Moraxella catarrhalis. These are three organisms are very, very important. So they are pioneers. So among them, pneumococcus is number one and most common cause of ASM. Other organisms, Streptococcus pyogenes, Staphylococcus, Pseudomonas also can cause. So you can see this is a normal tympanic membrane, very nicely shown. This is a left tympanic membrane. You can see this is the cone of light, and this is the lateral process of the malleus, and you can see the handle of malleus. Okay, and here you can see the shadow of infundostapedial joint over here. And it is that normal tympanic membrane is not fully transparent or not fully opaque. It is okay. And here this is the from lateral process of malleus you will have in the posterior malleolar fold, then a very small anterior malleolar fold or ligament. Okay, and this part is above the lateral process. You have this is the pars flaccida over here, and this is the pars tensa you can make out. And here you can see there is a little thickening also which is seen. This is known as the fibrous annulus. So and that is housed in a bony tympanic annulus. So sorry, the course of disease divided into 5 stages, stage of tubal occlusion, stage of suppuration, resolution, and complication. The tubal occlusion we have already discussed a lot. The edema and hyperemia of nasopharynx and eustachian tube occludes the eustachian tube and leads to negative medullary pressure. And some medullary effusion also can happen. Symptoms here are mild deafness and fullness in the ear and little bit of pain and tinnitus. So here you can see the picture. You can see this picture, and now coming to this picture. See here you can see the cone of light is distorted, and you can see the handle is very much prominent, and so is the lateral process is very prominent. And here you can see the membrane is also draped over the infundostapedial joint. Very clearly you can see, and here you can see this is the cauda tympani nerve going clearly. You can see the cauda tympani over here. Okay, and you can see very clearly the round window niche over here, the promontory. So there is a substantial amount of retraction. Okay, substantial amount of retraction occurs. So you will find signs of retracted tympanic membrane, and loss of light reflex, and conductive hearing loss. So what are the signs of a retracted tympanic membrane? So the most important sign of retracted tympanic membrane is one is a loss or distorted cone of light, then prominent or foreshortening of handle of malleus. So foreshortening means normally the handle it becomes as it goes as it retraction increases, no, the handle will be drawn more medially. So when you look from outside, you you will think that the handle is short in this case, or a small handle is there. But actually, it is not like that. The handle is of normal length. So there is foreshortening of, and there is prominent anterior and posterior malleolar folds, and then then you have is the there is a restricted movement of the tympanic membrane. So when you ask the patient to do Valsalva, there will be some amount of restricted movement. So these are features of a retracted tympanic membrane. Now this again you have different grades. We won't go into that. Now coming to the stage of pre-suppuration, now if the tubal occlusion in this stage, if the tubal occlusion is relieved by medication, then the patient, the tympanic membrane will go back to normals. But if the tubal occlusion still persists and is not relieved, then what happens? There occurs what happens? I'll tell you. So you know the middle ear has a lot of capillaries. Sorry, the middle ear has lot of capillaries over here inside. Now, as the tubal occlusion still persists, no, the middle ear what happened initially? The middle ear normally has air, and over a period of time, what happens? The air is slowly getting absorbed by the mucosa, and the negative pressure slowly it builds. And when the negative pressure exceeds a critical value, then what happens? There occurs transudation. So the capillaries start leaking. The capillaries start leaking, and then slowly, the middle ear is filled with fluid, which comes from the capillaries. So this fluid is initially sterile, but within a short period of time, it gets colonized by bacteria. It gets colonized by bacteria, mostly the pneumococcus or maybe Haemophilus influenza. So once there occurs colonization of pyogenic organism, no, that leads to development of pus. So in this pre-suppurative stage, as of now, there is no pus, but these inflammatory exudates are there in the middle ear mucosa. And the tympanic membrane, if you see, appears very much bulged and congested. So this bulged and congested tympanic membrane giving the appearance of a cartwheel. You can see the wheel of a cart. Leash of blood vessels are running in a centrifugal way from the center to the periphery. So this is known as the cartwheel appearance, typically seen in pre-suppurative stage. So pre-suppuration means till now the pus is not formed, but because of this, I told you the inflammatory exudates are there in the middle ear now. They fill up this middle ear space and they exert a pressure on the tympanic membrane. So this will lead to, and because the tympanic membrane is in direct contact with the inflammatory exudates, the tympanic membrane also becomes inflamed and congested. So there is a marked throbbing ear pain and high degree of fever and restlessness and bubbling sound in the ear. So usually a small child may not be able to tell, but if it is seen in the adult or in an adolescent period, then definitely they can appreciate this bubbling sound. So sign is pars tensa is congested and bulging out with cartwheel appearance. TM uniformly congested and red. Tuning fork test, definitely there is conductive hearing loss. Now, stage of suppuration, there occur formation of pus in the middle ear and also in mastoid ears. Now, once there occur accumulation of serous fluid in the middle ear, no, these are very rich source of for bacterial colonization. So immediately bacterial colonization occurs, and then the serous fluid gets converted into purulent one or pus. So once pus is formed now, the pain becomes unbearable. It is excruciating pain and increasing deafness will be there. And constitutional symptoms due to absorption of toxin include fever, vomiting, and diarrhea. So signs: tympanic membrane appear red and bulged, and you will find a nipple-like projection on the tympanic membrane. So this nipple-like projection occurs in a particular area where the pressure is maximum on the tympanic membrane. And if you see, there is tenderness over the mastoid antrum, and if you do a X-ray, there is clouding of the mastoid air cells. So all the mastoid air cells appears clouded, means there is some amount of exudate present in the mastoid. Normally we find air in the mastoid air, but instead of air, you find lot of inflammatory exudates. Then stage of resolution. So this is the 9 out of 100 cases. No, 95 cases go into resolution. So, and you may not see them also. The resolution where there occurs a nipple-like projection. No, there at that point only the tympanic membrane ruptures due to pressure necrosis, and that leads to otorrhea. And once the pus is discharged, the inflammatory process begins to resolve. So initially it's a blood tinged discharge and later becomes mucopurulent. Blood tinged, why? Because the tympanic membrane is so much congested that any rupture now will open a capillary, and from there the blood will come, so mixed with pus, and it will be under pressure. And then when you put then the ear pain and fever also subsides. So once the discharge starts, slowly everything subsides. So when the patient comes to you in this stage, you find the purulent discharge is there. There is lot of copious amount of discharge comes out. Why there is copious amount of discharge, and why there is a pulsatile discharge? Because you see, the middle ear cavity is very small compared to the mastoid antrum and the mastoid air cell system. So the volume of mastoid air cell system is very much higher than that of the middle ear. So now imagine the mastoid air cell system is emptying into the middle ear of all the inflammatory exudates. So definitely there will be a high pressure in the middle ear leading to a pulsatile ear discharge. So this is known as a lighthouse sign, and perforation of pars tensa is usually in the antero-inferior part. Why antero-inferior? Because that is the most dependent part, and the more pressure will be there exerted at that part of the tympanic membrane. So definitely that part will give away, and then the discharge, which is already under high pressure, starts coming out. Stage of complication. So in this, majority of cases are self-limiting and responds well to medical treatment. So some cases even without treatment also they resolve. There is no need for any medical treatment. Those who are in the remote areas, they don't come. Once it discharges, no, automatically if you see after 2 to 3 weeks, it would have resolved of its own. But if the child is unfortunate, malnourished, say like protein energy malnutrition, or has anemia, and the resistance of the child is poor, or if the child is also having exanthematous fever in that condition, or the virulence of organism is high. So in this situation, means there are few from the organism side, few from the patient side. The organism side mostly might be a highly virulent organism, or in some cases also a drug resistant organism. Now you are getting lot of organisms having antimicrobial resistance. So even though you give the treatment on time, the organism doesn't respond because of resistance. So one is virulence, number two is resistance. These are the organism part. Patient part is immunity. The immunity of the child is very important. If the immunity is low, then obviously he or she is more susceptible and more likely to land up with complications. So complication include very commonly acute mastocytitis. You can say mastocytitis is not a complication, but rather a part of the air cell, because anyhow the mastered air cell system will be involved in acute suppurative otitis media. But this is definitely a complication, a subperiosteal abscess. So subperiosteal abscess, facial paralysis, labyrinthitis, meningitis, extradural abscess, brain abscess, lateral sinus thrombophlebitis. Now, it is very rare for a person suffering with ASOM and presenting to you with facial paralysis. I'll just tell one line. If a case of ASOM comes with facial paralysis, no, then one thing you have to do, you suspect that the patient might be having a dehiscent fallopian canal. Dehiscent. So normally the fallopian canal covers the facial nerve. So, and the facial nerve has different parts, like you have the intracranial part, and you have the intratemporal part, and you have the extracranial part. The intratemporal part again is divided into intrameatal, that is the part which lies in the internal auditory meatus. Then you have the labyrinthine part, which is very closely related to the bony labyrinth. Then you have the after the labyrinthine part, you have the horizontal part, you have the vertical part. So the horizontal part, also otherwise known as the tympanic part, and the vertical part is also known as the mastoid part. So the horizontal part or the tympanic part of the facial nerve, and there is more chance of congenital dehiscence of fallopian canal. So in this condition, there can occur facial paralysis in the setting of ASM. So you can divide ASM into four subgroups. One is the sporadic, where you find infrequent isolated events commonly associated with URTI. Then you have a resistant group, where there is persistent of middle ear infection beyond a short course of antibiotic treatment, like 3 to 5 days. Even though you give antibiotics for 3 to 5 days, still there is persistence of infection. Then persistence or recurrence of symptoms or signs of AOM within 6 days of completing a course of antibiotics. This is two different things. So here you finish the complete course of antibiotic, and it gets better, but again there, or it may not resolve, or it may get better and again recur within 6 days. So that is known as persistent ASM. Then recurrent ASM. So where you have 3 or more episodes in 6 months, or 4 to 6 episodes in 12 months. So these are the four different groups of or subgroups of ASM. Diagnosis usually made clinically, and tympanometry can be used to confirm the presence of fluid in the middle ear, which is not seen in early phase. Microbiological culture, particularly in cases resistant to first-line therapy. So definitely you have to go for a culture and sensitivity. And in severe or complicated case, you have to do for a like a blood culture. You can do the blood counts, inflammatory markers like interleukins 2 and interleukin 6, and even you can go for a blood culture. High resolution CT scan of temporal bone rules out osteitis, abscess formation, and intracranial complication. So, a child who is not responding or deteriorating in spite of your treatment, very, very important, you get a high resolution HRCT of the temporal bone. So management, spontaneous resolution in almost majority of cases, and there is no evidence to support the efficacy of antibiotics within first 24 to 48 hours. Use of antibiotics reduces the progression of disease and the rate of relapse of symptom or incidence of complications. So you are not giving antibiotic to cure the disease, but rather to prevent a relapse or even to the extent of preventing a complication. So usually we recommend, not only we, but it is given in book that the first antibiotic of choice in upper respiratory tract infection is amoxicillin. So those who are sensitive to penicillin, you can go for a macrolide like clarithromycin or azithromycin. But amoxicillin remains the drug of choice. Why? Because if you go back to the organism, no, Streptococcus pneumoniae is a gram positive, and Haemophilus gram negative, and Moraxella is gram positive. So amoxicillin and Streptococcus pneumoniae is the most common organism. In almost more than 50 to 60% cases, it is pneumococcus. So in those conditions, amoxicillin has a very good coverage over gram positive organism. And now with the addition of clavulanic acid, it has become still more potent. Analgesia definitely to relieve the pain, nasal and oral decongestant for symptomatic control. So definitely you find the nasopharyngeal mucosa is very much congested and edematous. So you want to relieve the congestion. So when you are using a local nasal drop like oxymetazoline or xylometazoline, that drop trickles into the nasopharynx and comes in contact with nasopharyngeal mucosa and also decongests. So you can also rely on oral decongestant. As of now, there were two systemic decongestants, that is pseudoephedrine and phenylephrine. The pseudoephedrine has been banned, so now only phenylephrine is the decongestant which is working. Drainage of middle ear fluid, either with or without grommet insertion, is effective at reducing otalgia and can provide a sample of pus for microbiological. So this is drainage of middle ear fluid via a tympanotomy or myringotomy. So myringotomy means you make an incision over the tympanic membrane over the anteroinferior quadrant or posterior-inferior quadrant, and you allow the pus to escape out. Okay, and then this for culturing, you have to go for a tympanocentesis. That is, you injure a very fine needle via the tympanic membrane and aspirate the pus and send it for culture. That is known as tympanocentesis. But after giving a nick and then once the pus comes out, if you take a swab and collect, that will not give you the correct organism. Why? Because when you are introducing the swab, the commensals of the external auditory canal are also taken along. So they might interfere with the growth of the pathogenic organism. So tympanocentesis has a very high yield of bacteria. So definitely the bacteria will grow once you have drawn from tympanocentesis. The presence of complication is also an indication for surgical drainage. So, obviously, child is not responding, getting toxic, or the child is developing headache, drowsiness. All these are ominous signs. Or developing facial paralysis, weakness on one side of face. All these are ominous signs that the child is going towards complication. So in that case, in that situation, you have to immediately drain the abscess. So the only way to drain is you do a myringotomy and you drain. So usually when you are doing it for ASOM, no, you don't require a grommet. So it is usually without grommet only. You drain it out and then you leave it. So when you keep a grommet, now what happens? It prevents spontaneous closure of the tympanic membrane. So you may have a permanent perforation syndrome also, and that will cause another headache for you. So usually we avoid grommet. We just give a nick and you introduce a fine suction and suck out all the what you say the pus, uh, and then you can also instill some amount of antibiotic directly into the middle ear along with some steroid to reduce the edema of the middle ear. So where spontaneous rupture is the tympanic membrane has occurred, patients should be encouraged to keep their ears dry, and majority of such perforation will heal spontaneously within 3 months, and appropriate follow-up is advised. So yesterday, I know this has already been taught. So this finishes the course, the total thing of ASOM. So yesterday you have heard this, but keratosis obturans. Have you heard? Undergraduates. Hello. Hello. They're not responding. Hello, Anwar.
Yes, sir.
You are able to hear? No, there is no break in my voice. No.
No, sir. No break, sir.
Uh-huh. Are undergraduates?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes,
Why
sir.
you are not? Why you are not responding? Are you not getting the audio clearly?
Yes, sir.
Eh?
No, sir, we are here. Yes, sir. We are just taking some time to up on the mics.
Acha, acha, acha. Okay, okay. No, no. Are you? The audio is clear for you, na?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this keratosis obturans was taught in the last class by Dr. Prasanna, and I took this up. Why? Because these are very two similar conditions actually, keratosis obturans and primary auditory canal cholesteatoma, and even also another condition which is not here is benign necrotizing otitis media. So all these three, and you have another condition known as malignant otitis media. So the main pathology here is epithelial migration abnormality, whereas here you will find that there is abnormal bone leading to migration of epithelium into this bone. So here the epithelium migrates into the bone, whereas here there is itself a problem in the migration. So what problem in migration occurs? I'll just go back to this picture. Just 1 minute. Normally, if you see, no, the migration occurs in centrifugal way like this. From here it goes and comes into the land. Here it comes here and then comes out. Here it comes here and comes out. Here it comes here and comes out. So pars flaccida migration is totally separate. It goes from there like this. But here what happens in keratosis, the pars flaccida, no, the keratin debris, instead of going in centrifugal way, they come down into the pars densa. So all the keratin debris, no, they come onto the pars densa. So this is the pathology of what you known as a abnormal migration. So abnormal epithelial migration. So the keratosis obturans and primary auditory canal cholesteatoma, there are usually you think that they are of the same entity, but they are not. There are few differences, and the most glaring one is in keratosis obturans, you have a conductive hearing loss, whereas in auditory canal cholesteatoma, you don't have a conductive hearing loss. Then it may have a normal hearing. And it's a painful condition. There is severe otalgia, whereas here it is almost painless or there is very small amount of discomfort here. Usually involve the younger age group keratosis and here in elderly age group. And in this keratosis occurrence, you will have like other motility disorder abnormality like bronchiectasis and sinusitis. So they are also will be seen, but here you don't have any such problem. Okay, and when you see the medial, the bony canal now in keratosis occurrence, the bony canal is very much ballooned out. Bony canal is ballooned out, but here the bony canal, you find that there is localized osteitis and erosion of the ear canal, usually in the posterior inferior quadrant. So here there is a ballooning, but here there is localized osteitis, and there is some discontinuity of the skin also. Discontinuity of the skin also, and you can see flaky debris there. Here, because this occurs in a very organized way in case of keratosis occurrence now, the epithelial debris, they go on accumulating over a period of time and appear like a onion skin appearance. So slowly one over the other layers getting deposited. But here you will find no such onion because there is a haphazard deposition. So there is no pattern followed over here in case of primary auditory canal cholesteatoma. So here, what happens if you remove the plug, local treatment of granulation and biopsy may need continued clearings or cleanings. Here you have to surgically remove cholesteatoma and abnormal bone and graft it with fascia and send it for a biopsy. So this I wanted to show to you. This is a very important thing, which I think definitely Dr. Prasanna might have touched, but I just want to just refresh your memories. Any questions? Any question?
No, sir.
No doubt for you? Hmm? Anyone can ask a question. There's no problem. So your exam dates are out. You know that, no? Today is 14th, na? Are you aware of that?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Huh? Are you aware that your exam dates are out?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Now, most likely the exam, I don't know by that time whether this COVID will be under control. 99% it doesn't look like. So you will be having an online exam. And I think online MCQ based exam you might get. So when you are having an MCQ based exam, now you have to be very thorough with the topic. Then only you can, and you have to read the book thoroughly. The MCQ will test your depth of your study. So even my PGs also will agree with you. And Lasya and Anwar, correct or not?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Sir,
So if you are given a long question, whatever you write, cock one bull story, no, we will give you 2 or 3 marks for that. Chalo, he has written something, you give it. Maybe 2-3 words might be interesting. But if in that, if 10 MCQs are there and you have not read, means you are straight away getting 0. So either you score very high or you come down. So my suggestion is whatever topics are taught to you, you read it, and in the next class, I encourage you. You ask doubt. If you don't ask doubt and don't interact, then it becomes a one-way here. Now because I am, you are not there, and in class I used to interact with you a lot, ask questions and some doubts and all. But here it's difficult. So you have to have that inquisitiveness in your mind to ask it out or something, because just passively sitting in class won't help. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So next class, you all of you should come with doubts and ask to me. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So what's the portion for the